Another re-upload, and it's for the same reason as the last one. In my mind, this video just belongs on this channel. And once again, I'll sprinkle in some additional commentary now that it's been a few months since the original upload. Also, as I went through this video again, I realized it's kind of really 3 videos. It's a critique on modern gaming in relation to randomized extrinsic rewards and collection-based incentives. It's kind of a journal about my journey with and fondness for the Pokemon series, and it's a scathing review of the Pokemon games as a whole. So yeah, you're getting 3 for 1, and here it is. It's been over 2 years since I set out to collect a Living Origin Dex. That's one of every species of Pokemon stored away in Pokemon Home. After hundreds of hours of walking through tall grass, throwing Pokeballs, and grinding out XP for evolutions, I'm finally finished. I've completed my goal, and I feel nothing. No sense of accomplishment, no relief for reaching the end, no regret for the time wasted, and certainly no yearning for more. It was usually a mindless second screen activity, a way to keep my hands busy while I'd unwind at the end of a day listening to a podcast or watching YouTube videos. I'd have gone crazy if 100% of my focus was ever put into searching for all these little goblins. It's a strange thing to have ever wanted to do in the first place, and it's even stranger that I continued long after realizing it wasn't fun. In my opinion. Clearly. I know people get defensive when they hear someone talk badly about something they like. I get it, and feel free to tell me about how wrong I am in the comments. You're certainly not alone. I think of fun as a main category with 3 sort of subcategories or types. Type 1 fun is something that's truly engaging and entertaining as it's happening. It may cause you to laugh or smile or get excited. Type 2 fun is something that's really only fun once it's completed. I built this tiny house that I'm sitting in right now, and the actual work of building it wasn't fun, but standing back and looking at what I'd built was fun, or at least satisfying. Type 3 fun is when you look back at something that was neither fun during nor satisfying after, but you feel nostalgic about it given enough time, and now have positive feelings towards the experience. Currently, the way I feel about my time catching them all is none of these. I can see it becoming Type 3 fun given enough time, but my guess is I'll probably just stay kind of neutral about it and it will never actually tip into positive. Again, I feel nothing about it. It all just amounted to a way of unwinding at the end of days while I split my attention and grew tired before going to sleep. Okay? Okay. But once I got going, the sunk cost of it all immediately started to spin up and I was compelled to continue collecting. Collecting appears to be a normal and common human activity, recognized on a continuum between beneficial hobby and mental disorder. However, a partial, incomplete collection can motivate someone to spend excessive amounts of time and money to feel whole. Game designers know this, and they use it to their advantage. These days, they combine it with daily, limited time offers to create an active user trap that all too many of us have fallen into at one time or another. I made a video recently about how I became addicted to Pokemon Go. You should pause this video and watch that one first for more context. The gist is that Pokemon Go took over my life because I allowed my quest for collection completion to become hijacked by a game that doesn't respect the player's time. While I went into the game with a set goal in mind, that being to obtain the mythical Pokemon I couldn't get through playing the main series, I still fell victim to FOMO, the daily reward system, and, most insidious of all, comparison to other players. It's bad enough to have online influencers constantly flaunting their collections, but the envy extends to those you meet in person as well, which creates a real, tangible point of comparison. In Pokemon Go, the game encourages you to show off your prized Pokemon in gyms, showcases, and as your buddy for everyone on your friends list to see. In a game that is entirely built around collecting, with the actual gameplay elements existing only to serve as a bit of friction between you and the next acquisition, it's obvious why you'd be constantly teased with things that you do not yet have. This is not new to gaming. It's a trick that's been used for decades, though it's been ramped up in the past 10 years or so, and lately I think it has made playing video games a much riskier hobby and genuinely dangerous for younger players. Now, maybe you don't relate. Maybe you only play games for the actual experiences they offer, the moment-to-moment gameplay or the social connection. That's great, and that's what I strive to get back to now that I'm completely done with Pokemon. Games are just more fun when you're not worried about what digital widget you get to hold in your inventory. But there have been a few times I can remember where I slipped and fell into acquisition mode. It can be hard to recognize when it's happening, and before you know it, you're trapped in a hamster wheel. Children seem to naturally fall victim to collection building in particular. As a kid, I can remember obsessing over Goosebumps books and Pogs, and I'm sure there were more collection fads that I've forgotten. Once Pokemon entered the scene, that was all I cared about. Catching them all in the game was one relatively easy part of that, but I extended that acquisition mindset into recording all the episodes of the anime on VHS, and of course, collecting Pokemon cards. I remember being so upset when I learned there was an episode of the anime that didn't air in Canada because it featured Porygon flashing different colors and was giving kids seizures. It meant my VHS collection would forever remain incomplete, and that may have been what ended that pursuit for me since I've always been an all or nothing type of collector. Then there were Pokemon cards. I was there at the beginning and it felt possible to actually complete the set. I still have them all and I'm finally going to figure out how to sell them. Now, when it comes to digital collections, the Napster era took many hours of my life as I attempted to complete the entire pirated discographies of various bands. I was in my early teens at the height of that obsession, and I spent so much time tracking down and cataloging MP3s. I didn't even want to listen to all of it, I just wanted to know I had it. When it came to video games, aside from Pokemon, I didn't have so much of a collection mindset as I did a completionist mindset, which is equally destructive depending on the game. Collecting all the stars in Super Mario 64? Hey, that's a fun challenge filled with interesting gameplay opportunities. Collecting all the bananas in Donkey Kong 64? Complete hell. And yet, at least those bananas are just there waiting for you. They won't disappear tomorrow, and they won't appear in randomly generated places at randomly generated times with randomly generated stats. And that's the difference between a collectathon game versus what came later, the live service game. For me, it was Destiny, a first-person shooter from the Halo people with a heavy cooperative element. Yes please, I'll take two. I had never played a loot game before. No MMOs and nothing like Diablo. Being exclusively a console player seems to have spared me from those kinds of games early on, and I'm genuinely grateful for that. I don't think I ever would have left the proverbial basement if I became a PC gamer. So Destiny was my first taste of loot-incentivized gameplay. Random loot, to be exact. Now, I liked the idea of my character getting stronger, leveling up and equipping better armor and weapons. It was the RPG-ification of everything, right? What I didn't like is how random that equipment was distributed, and yet I came back day after day, week after week, for another chance to roll the dice. Like any good live service game, there were bonus incentives if you logged in daily and completed certain activities. And there were weekly activities which, if you didn't participate in, you'd feel like you were falling behind. And in some instances, when a particularly impressive weapon was up for grabs, you were behind if you didn't get it. Groups would demand that you have that weapon before they let you join. There were always little reminders that every day you don't play, you're missing out. Now, the gameplay in Destiny was superb. I have yet to again reach the gaming heights of raiding with 5 friends in Destiny and Destiny 2. I truly enjoyed the challenge, the teamwork and coordination, and as we became more competent at completing raids, it was the mastery of it that really drove me. Yes, the drops were random, but for me, the gameplay was its own reward. Unfortunately, everyone in the group came out of raids with differing levels of satisfaction, and for some, if they didn't get the loot they were after, it spoiled the whole experience. Comparing this to Pokemon Go, which is entirely about the loot drop because the gameplay is dead simple and doesn't require any real coordination between players, it's easy to see why people get addicted to the drop and frustrated by the constant disappointment. However, since dopamine releases as part of the anticipation for the drop, your brain is telling you to just do it again. This is ultimately why I knew I needed to quit Pokemon Go cold turkey. I couldn't allow myself to bargain with the part of me that was addicted. I'd had this experience twice before, and both times were with the Animal Crossing series of all things. With Animal Crossing, I had the advantage of being able to control when I played it, because you can just change the system date and time, but I had the disadvantage when it came to the sheer amount of content to collect, and the randomness at which it appeared. I didn't want to miss any of the items for sale from any of the in-game vendors, and I wanted to maximize my return on turnips, which is the in-game stock market simulator. What I love about Animal Crossing is the ability to design and decorate your town. There are a lot of limitations, but the constraints are fun to push up against and lead to a lot of satisfying creative moments. There are a ton of items in the games, but you can't just select them. You need to wait until they are available for sale or try to find someone online that can give you one. Once you obtain something the first time, you can get it again as much as you like. Most of the stuff is nothing I'd realistically use, but I wanted all the options. So I was collecting for the sake of collection. Not for the utility, just to have, just in case. This psychological trap is how people end up starting games they just can't stop. So many games are now designed with the intention to addict the player. These games don't want you to ever stop playing them. but I harped on that enough in my last video. Let's talk about the mainline Pokemon series because I've played them all multiple times over the past 2 years. Yes, multiple times, because of course every generation has at least 2 versions, and because I stupidly decided an Origin Dex was best, I played every generation. First off, version exclusive one-off legendaries locked behind DLC? Gotta catch them all? More like gotta buy 2 copies of the game with DLC that cannot be resold. Wow. In case you can't already tell, as I reminisce about the many hours of repetitive bullshit I endured while catching them all, I may come off as negative. But I will say some positive things up front. The character design is always excellent. Even the most ridiculous Pokemon are charming in their own way. I like them. I just like these little freaks. Clerical work can be satisfying. Yes, I enjoyed lining up my little gremlins in order, amassing them all together in their boxes, and shipping them through time and space from Pokemon Bank to Pokemon Home, and in and out of different generations as needed. Perfect example of Type 2 fun. It was frustrating at many times to actually get the Pokemon where they needed to be, but scrolling through them all at the end? 2 minutes of bliss. This Ditto did breeding in every generation and is the mother and/or father of many in my collection. And that's it. Okay, not quite. While editing this, I did listen to a lot of the music and it reminded me that the music in these games is actually pretty good. Maybe it's just nostalgia, but I like it. But that's it. The games are bad. They aren't challenging unless you make them a challenge, and the stories are, frankly, lame. Yes, grown man criticizes children's game. A children's game made by adults. Adults can criticize things made for children. As an uncle, I've had young kids in my life for the past 13 years, and my own child now for the past 3, and I've watched how they interact with games and toys. And here's the thing. I was 11 when I first played Pokemon. I was a child with first-hand experience. Adults provide things for children, and we want the things we provide for children to be good. I know they're for kids, but kids deserve better. The dialogue is atrocious, and some of the characters, like this Twitch streamer gym leader, honestly, it just screams, "Hello fellow kids," and it's cringe as f. I have never mashed A so much in my life. I usually force myself to read all the dialogue I see in games to get the full experience, but the amount of slop text in Pokemon games is insane. It's just dialogue for the sake of filling dialogue boxes. The games would be half as long if they just had a skip all text option, and you'd miss nothing. And children would fill in the blanks with their imagination, creating their own, much more meaningful stories. I remember doing that as an 11-year-old. I mean, just what is the story of the first Pokemon game? You're a kid who wants to become the champion, which is just something to do, I guess. That's certainly your rival's goal, but he's a dick and he doesn't deserve it. The B plot is that there's an incompetent criminal organization being mean to Pokemon and using them to commit crimes. And by humiliating their leader in a Pokemon battle, the organization dissolves. Nothing is over-explained, and you, as the main character, don't speak and aren't expected to. The gameplay is the focus, not the story, and that was to the strength of the first game. Maybe that's why they force you to go through it. Padding out game length is another tragedy of game design that started long before live service games took over. But I digress. Since I'm hoping to never talk about Pokemon again after this video, I am now going to unload all my thoughts and feelings about Pokemon. And we'll start with story time. This really all started because of the 3DS eShop closing in early 2023. In the weeks leading up to the closure, all those usual influencers were talking about how the early Pokemon games would soon be gone, and that's when my FOMO set in. What if I never catch them all? You gotta catch them all! So before it closed, I went full consumerism and bought everything I'd need to complete an Origin Dex, which is a term I came across from Wolf Duckworth on YouTube. I'll link him in the description. Tragically, I don't think Wolf completed his goal. No, not tragically. Thankfully, he abandoned it and saved himself a lot of time. Okay, that was harsh. He was live streaming the whole thing, and doing anything socially like that does make it exponentially more satisfying. If I'd been streaming or playing alongside a friend, I'd probably have had a nicer time too. Anyway, he describes an Origin Dex as a somewhat reasonable living Pokedex, and I agree. It's simple and elegant. One of each Pokemon obtained in their original region. That means Kanto for the first 151, Johto for the next 100, etc. Playing remakes is valid, which means Shining Pearl, Alpha Sapphire, and even Let's Go Pikachu. I like the little Game Boy icon you get here if you use the original Game Boy games, so Gen 1 and 2 I did through the Virtual Console and didn't use the Let's Go remakes. From the eShop, I bought red, blue, yellow, gold, silver, and crystal. They weren't too expensive, and that covered me for everything from Gen 1 and 2, except Mew. I got Mew from Gen 4, and I just don't care enough to go through the headache of replacing it. I already had Pokemon White physically, apparently, although I don't remember buying or playing it, and I already had Alpha Sapphire and X digitally, leaving me to buy and download Ultra Moon, and then I went to eBay for the rest in physical copies because DS games aren't on the eShop and 3DS games were still reasonably priced on eBay. I bought Black, White 2, both of which were stupidly expensive, Omega Ruby, Y, Sun, and Ultra Sun. I didn't actually need Sun, but it was cheap. I started this little quest in April of 2023, playing good old Pokemon Red when I had a few minutes here and there, but I didn't start Gen 2 until after I played 100 some odd hours of Tears of the Kingdom. I was then very slowly making my way through Crystal version when Nintendo announced they were shutting down the 3DS online services. They claimed that Pokemon Bank would continue, but I didn't trust that one bit. So I hopped to it and finished catching all of Gen 2 in October, then jumped to Gen 5, finishing that in November. I was planning to play the remakes for Generation 3 and 4, so I skipped over them in order to keep things chronological. That way, the games would, theoretically, get more advanced as I went, rather than playing a 3DS game, then a Switch game, then a DS game. I finished Gen 3 and 6 in December, then I side-quested hard into Pokemon Go. Again, you can watch this video all about that. I finished Gen 7 sometime in the first half of 2024, and after finally catching them all in Gens 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, and 7, I was done with Pokemon Bank and could move them all into Pokemon Home. I must admit, it's pretty cool of them to keep this functionality running. This is the kind of thing I would expect Nintendo to shut down as soon as they could get away with it. I then played through Gen 4 on the Switch over the summer, while Pokemon Go had me firmly in its grasp, and I started the Pokemon Go YouTube channel, which depleted the remainder of my free time. Gen 8 took a good long while to get through because I had zero reason to rush through it, and I was burning out between Pogo and YouTube. It also didn't help that I needed to play through it 3 full times because of something I didn't realize about the DLC and certain legendary Pokemon. Anyway, I finally finished Gen 8 in April of 2025. I also finished catching what I was missing from Arceus around this time, which I forgot to mention entirely in the original upload of this video, and then finally finished off Gen 9 at the end of May. I actually started playing Scarlet around the time it was released in late 2022, and restarted it in April of 2023, around the time I came across that Wolf Duckworth video. I only restarted it because I wanted to change my trainer name, something I no longer care about. This is why they call YouTubers influencers. Wolf's videos set me down the path. I was heavily influenced. Beware the brain rot, fellow internet travelers. Anyway, it was April 2023 when I started playing Pokemon Go and started buying up all the old games as well. So, damn you, April 2023. Honestly though, it was really nice to be immersed in Pokemon at the beginning of this journey. I have so many fond memories of it from when I was a kid. I'm in my late 30s now, so I'm firmly a Gen 1 guy. I first learned of Pokemon in an issue of Nintendo Power as Poke Fever was taking over Japan. My dumb little kid brain didn't understand how to play an RPG, but catching and battling those funny little critters sounded like a good time. I played the ever-loving snot out of Pokemon Red. And eventually, once I ran out of things to do and friends to battle, I created what we now call a Living Dex, having one of each 150 original Pokemon stored in order in the boxes. This was long before anyone ever called it a Living Dex, like we're talking 1999. Or maybe some people were calling it a Living Dex, I don't know, I was 12. Anyway, I even had them all at level 100 thanks to rare candies from our old pal Missing No. I needed to borrow a second Game Boy and buy myself a copy of Pokemon Blue because I couldn't convince my dumb little friends to erase their games, play through the first 10 minutes of the game repeatedly, and trade me the other 8 starters that I needed, not to mention 3 more Eevees. I guess that was a big ask for a 12-year-old. A year or so later, which felt like a decade back then, I bought Pokemon Silver, then eventually I would get Ruby, Fire Red. I skipped Diamond and Pearl, but did play Soul Silver. Then I skipped Gen 5 completely, but I definitely played X with the encouragement and rivalry from a friend. But then I was definitely done with Pokemon for a good long while. Not quite. I did play Alpha Sapphire alongside my roommates at the time. Honestly though, it's all kind of a blur after Gen 2. I'd mostly just play through each game, roll the credits, and be done. What was fun for an 11-year-old quickly became a target on my back by the time I was 13. No more Game Boy at school. Let's put it that way. I didn't complete another Pokedex after Gen 1. My friends had mostly moved on, so I had no one to seriously battle or trade with, and I had so many other great games to play, especially once I got a GameCube and a part-time job. Plus, the magic was just gone. My childhood was evaporating, and instead of collecting pocket monsters, I set out to collect a different kind of monster. Girlfriends. Anyway, 25 years go by, and the Pokemon Company puts out this video. Alright, you got me. I bought Arceus and had a good time. I bought Scarlet and had an okay time. But look at this guy. He's down on all fours like God intended. Unlike these freaks, standing. Playing through Scarlet the first time reminded me of how much fun I used to have with these games. I loved battling my friends, and it was so satisfying when I completed that first Pokédex. But as an adult, after playing so many great non-Pokemon games over the years, these just don't hit the same. First of all, the Safari Zone is really stupid. And I'm really glad Missing No is a thing because the game corner is also really stupid. And of course, getting the starters was a major pain. Bulbasaur, Charmander, Squirtle, I needed 3 of each, so I played the first 10 minutes repeatedly to get all 9 starters. There's no way to breed in the original Game Boy games, so I needed to restart the game a bunch and transfer them one by one to Pokemon Bank. And again, because there's no breeding in the original games, I needed to play through half the game 4 times to get 4 EVs and extra copies of the fossil Pokemon. Otherwise, it was pretty smooth sailing, aside from the tedious box system of those games. But again, the Safari Zone can go f*** itself. The catch rate seemed way lower in Gen 2, especially compared to later games. There was a bit of nonsense around the bug contest, but having breeding in the game eased some of the pain of catching. The roaming beast legendaries though, so annoying. Wow, that intro takes a while. Gen 5 felt slow at first compared to Gens 1 and 2. Luckily, you get the running shoes pretty quick, and mashing A is totally valid. But there is so much talking in this game. I know people think of this as the Pokemon game with the best story, but that really isn't saying much. It's not deep. And musical theater? Get me out of here! The random encounters seem to be ramped way up. Sometimes you couldn't take a single step before another one would pop up. However, seeing only new Pokemon until beating the Elite Four was great. I appreciate Gen 5 a ton for doing that. It was nice reaching the 3DS era, and I made it through these games quite quickly. Hoenn can be annoying to navigate, but the Dex Nav is nice for catching multiples of the same Pokemon. These games also look really good. If they were re-released as is at a higher resolution, I don't think people would complain. I ended up using Alpha Sapphire to evolve all of my Gen 5 catches, since I wouldn't be able to do that on the Switch thanks to Dexit. I found myself getting lost in Kalos a lot due to the camera being too close and there were some jank angle changes. The routes were weird and the towns were just really busy but generic looking. Then again, I was in a hurry. The writing in this game stood out as especially bad. And while I enjoy rollerblades, they are not better than a bike. Okay, I hated the island setup and the map in general. Maybe I was just too used to the grid structure of previous games, but I found it very annoying to navigate Alola. Also, does this game have just the worst starters? At least it has the best evil team. These guys are so bad, they're good. Unlike Team Yell, which is just bad. Pokemon games always have a thirst trap in there somewhere, but Olivia! Tauros is not better than a bike. This is even worse than rollerblades. This gen had some annoying little quirks, like needing to use a separate button to switch Pokemon positions in your party. What? And the player character always smiling? Just never changing their face at all was very off-putting. I did enjoy the dark turn the story took though. This game made me realize that Pokemon has been using the multiverse plot device for a long time. Way back in Ruby and Sapphire most obviously. And it's front and center in Gen 7 with Team Rainbow Rocket. Anyway, fuck Ultra Space and this jank upon jank that you need to endure to get a chance upon chance at finding Guzzlord. That took way too long. I played a tiny bit of Gen 4 on the DS version in order to get the mythicals using the DNS method, and holy hell that generation was painfully slow. I'm glad I decided to use the remakes. Thank God there are guides for getting Spirit Tomb, it's just bad, dumb. I skipped every bit of text in this generation. I really appreciate the use of the tip that just tells you where to go next. Pokemon battles are drawn out though, which is a problem with a lot of these games. There's just so much wasted time in basic, repetitive animations. I used the Gen 4 remakes to evolve everything I still needed to from the first 3 generations, since I could move them all from home into Shining Pearl with ease. Yeesh, I had to play all the way through this game 3 times because I refused to buy the DLC twice. Continuing the trend from Gen 7, some legendary Pokemon just take so much effort to get, and it's exhausting. Not being able to use the Regis I already had in my collection felt like a slap in the face during this puzzle to get the new Regis, which I had to do twice. I'll admit my experience of it was tainted because I was just trying to get the thing done, and maybe all that grinding for a single Pokemon would be viewed as a worthy accomplishment under different circumstances. I don't know. But I gotta say, this generation looks so much better than Gen 9. It's a shame they couldn't carry these visuals forward into the open world format. Although that Switch 2 update, doing some work. Still looks like but it's doing some work. Also, something I've thought a lot more about since the making of this video is the fact that putting out 2 versions of these games is wholly unnecessary and literally just a cash grab. I mean, no shit. It's especially bad on the Switch where no data is saved on the game card itself. There is absolutely no reason each generation couldn't come on a single card and just force you to choose a path at the beginning of the game, which would lead to slight variations and different Pokemon to catch. The differences between versions are extremely minor, and I bet they could have been doing that for every generation past Gold and Silver, assuming they were even pushing up against the data limits of those Game Boy games. But the fact is, they sell a double pack of Scarlet and Violet because they know damn well that there are millions of fools who are going to buy both. And yes, for many generations, that was me. I was one of those fools. But I borrowed the Switch games because there was no way I was buying each generation twice when all the save data is tied to my user account on my Switch and not the game card. With a single game card, you can have 2 user profiles on your Switch, and if Nintendo wasn't being anti-consumer, you could have a Scarlet save and you could have a Violet save off of 1 game card. And before you ask, yes, both user accounts on a single Switch can send Pokemon to the same Pokemon home account, allowing you to move them between your saves. If any Pokemon fans are still watching this video at this point, please start complaining very loud about this 2-version system because it's complete bullshit. Ever since playing Breath of the Wild, I wanted Pokemon to be like that. This was not. This was a buggy and visually displeasing mess. Now it's just visually displeasing. And I already mentioned how awful it is to have single obtainable legendaries in DLC. I have nothing more to say that hasn't been said a million times about these games, and I am happy to never touch them again. I almost forgot about this one. Fortunately, I was able to use the genies from Gen 5 to get through the Enamorous quest. Catching her was a pain, but at least I didn't need to catch the other genies first. I decided to get my Arceus from Legend Arceus, and while it took a long time, I was again able to use Pokemon I caught from previous games to help complete the quest. This game did a lot right. It felt more video gamey than the standard mainline games, and I really appreciated it for that. I'm sure that turned away plenty of people who aren't into games that require a little bit of eye-hand coordination, but I liked it. And that's it. I know it sounds like I hate these games, and I do. Okay, no, I don't. I was angry and I said something I didn't mean. I'm getting old and I'm jaded. Truth is, they are just so much worse than they could and should be. They make so much money off these games and all the merchandise that there is just no excuse for these not being some of the most impressive games ever made. And that's what I hate. But I want them to be good. I'll probably get Legends ZA, though it doesn't look as good as Arceus. Hopefully I'm just not seeing the potential and it surprises me. I still haven't played ZA and I am not compelled to. I have plenty of games I am much more excited to play right now, and I've completely avoided the FOMO on this one. I'll probably just wait at this point and pick it up used one day, though I have heard some good things about it from people I trust, but it's still always bundled in with the usual complaints. I'm actually really looking forward to Gen 10 just to see what they do as a follow-up to Scarlet and Violet. But I do think I'll go into it and play a Nuzlocke right off the bat, or put some kind of restriction on my gameplay to make it more challenging. In the meantime, I'm just not going to think about Pokemon at all. Catching them all was on my gaming bucket list, and I'm checking it off. So many good games came out while I was infected with Pokemania, and while I'd like to say I'm ready to catch up on some recent releases, I'm actually just longing for more of my childhood. So I'm packing my lunchbox and heading back to 2001. And by that, I of course mean my little GameCube challenge video series thing. It's called the Cubic Countdown, and the first video in that series is coming out very soon on this channel, featuring everyone's favorite Mario launch game, Luigi's Mansion. Following that will be a few other videos I've had cooking for a while, including one about how I almost destroyed my very special Game Boy, and a video about how the current top video on this channel is actually complete bullshit and you shouldn't listen to that guy. And with that, I'm officially picking back up on this channel where I left off in 2021. Good times. Thanks for sticking around, and I'll see you again soon.